My name is Kim. I'm 30 years old. I am a cisgender female. I identify as mixed race. I am from eastern Washington State, right on the Idaho border, Washington State. I am a government employee. I used to be a poet. I would like to still be a poet in the future. I also used to be a musician. And I am a feminist. I do.
Yeah.
But there's systems of oppression still exist, and gender-based oppression still exists, just as race-based. So because sexism is still a system that has not been fully dismantled in the United States society, it inherently must exist in the workplace, right? We still don't have pay equity across genders or across sexes. If you walk into many workplaces, you'll see a disparity amongst where do people typically of a certain identity work in, sort of the organizational chart compared to people of other identities. You see this sort of privilege hierarchy that happens. But that's not to say that a place where sexism or a system of oppression exists, that you can't actively work against being anti-oppressive. You can always have an anti-oppression lens towards anything.
So let's talk about your life.
Here's the interesting thing about oppression.
Okay.
One time when I was in college, I was taking a class called Asian American History. And at the very end, the professor had an assignment where he said, find an Asian American relative, interview them about their experiences with racism, and write a paper about it in the context of this class. My grandfather said, sure. One of the very first questions was, can you name one or two examples where you experienced racism in the United States? And how did you respond? And his response was, I've never experienced racism. I've only experienced people, trying to help me. And I remember reading that and being floored, because I have witnessed people being racist to my grandfather. Speak loudly and slowly to him because they think he doesn't speak English. Or, that's racism. They look at you and they think you don't speak English because of what's happening with your face.
Right.
And, so they're making a judgment based on your perceived race.
Right.
So I had witnessed so many moments like that, subtle or overt, but he himself had never experienced anything else. And so I'm telling this very long story as a way to illustrate, anyone who experiences oppression, you can name the overt instances. Everyone has the very painful moments that you can pick out every year. These homophobic or racist or sexist things happened. Hopefully it's only a small handful of things, right, and you can remember them and name them. But the sort of smaller microaggressions and the things you experience every day that are sort of smaller oppressions, sometimes you don't know that it's happening until either someone points it out to you or you stop experiencing.
It's almost a casual, innocent type of racism. I don't know if that exists, but
right. The first time that I actually remember experiencing that for myself was I was in a 3-year relationship with a woman. It was one of my first serious romantic relationships with anyone. Yeah. And it was great. I didn't think that we experienced homophobia at all the whole time we were dating. And then we broke up, which is a whole other story. And then my next relationship was with a man. I remember the first time we went to a restaurant together, we were greeted warmly, seated immediately at a table for 2. And I was like,
It's so different from my...
I have never gone on a date as an adult and been seated at a table for 2. I've always been seated after 5 minutes of waiting at the door, trying to catch someone's attention. And then we're seated at a table for 4 or 3 and because there's this unspoken thing that was happening with servers where they were just assuming we were coming with a group of people.
Because you were two girls, so they...
Because we were two women, or well, I don't know. They didn't tell me what they were thinking.
Right. Yeah.
But I just remember noticing after the fact.
But it's very interesting.
And it didn't occur to me before that relationship that was even a thing that couples expected when they went on dates, was to be seated at a small table in the corner next to a window, away from others.
Is this type of racism, it's not offensive though, right?
Well, that I would say is probably like institutional homophobia, or like heteronormativity. There's all sorts of words for it.
I think it would be, heteronormativity. They just assume. Do you think that type of racism is ever going to be eradicated? Is that impossible? Because it's the reason it comes about is just like naivety, you know?
I'm sure it's certainly possible, because people are inherently good people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to learn your social phobias.
Yeah.
And you have to learn you learn that stuff. A baby isn't just born like taking a second glance at a same-sex couple. You know, like you have to teach those social cues to kids. And so it's just every generation, we get a little bit better at working on dismantling those social structures that are actually like harmful, either on a micro level or a gigantic, painfully toxic level. Why has feminism become a bad word?
Why is it getting such a bad rap lately?
Well, it's like the fire of feminism has arrived.
I'm actually a witch. And you shouldn't have asked that question.
All I have to do is say feminism,
right.
And the flame overcomes the world.
Yeah.
I actually think feminism has always had a stigma to it.
Yeah. I
would say not just in the last couple of years, but maybe for a really long time.
Since it was a thing.
Yeah, I remember the first time I heard the word feminist was when I was in high school. A boy used it to like make fun of me.
Mm-hmm.
He walked up to me as trying to be mean and said, "Feminist," and then walked away. And I could tell from the tone of his voice he was trying to insult me,
right.
But I had never heard the word before.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I should be insulted.
I don't know why.
But I don't know what that word means.
Right.
And when I was in high school, the internet was still kind of the Wild West a little bit, so...
Oh, it still is now.
So, yes. So I typed in feminist, and there was like a couple live journal blogs about women's empowerment and the right to vote. And then there were a couple live journal blogs about how feminists are women who were like witches and trying to destroy men and trying to take men's rights and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if I necessarily found a bona fide article about it, but I remember realizing a feminist was someone who sort of like valued the liberation of women, and that this high school peer of mine decided to use that word against me to make me feel shame about myself.
Was that the beginning of you like becoming and realizing you were a feminist? Was that like moment?
Was like being informed that I was one in like a mean way.
Yeah.
It fueled me.
Was your awakening?
Yes, I was like
fire.
I was like, God damn it, that's right. What am I afraid of?
Mm-hmm.
I am afraid of getting fatally or terribly wounded in a car accident.
That's very specific.
Because when I was 28, I was in a really bad car accident, and now I'm very afraid of being in a car accident. But I love driving.
Yeah. So this crash like just inspired this phobia? Is it a phobia, would you say?
It's not a phobia. I think it's like
post-traumatic stress.
I was just like so traumatized.
Yeah.
Well, right after the car accident, for months, I would have dreams that I was driving and something would happen where everyone in my car would die, except for me.
Yeah.
And I would wake up and it would just be like this crushing responsibility. And it's the same with crossing the street, actually. If there are cars in the street, it's really hard for me to cross the street, like against a walk light. Even if there's still a green light, but it switches from the little walking person to the red hand, my heart jumps a little bit.
Wow.
And then I'll like see the car and I will either sprint across the street or I will wait a whole light cycle.
Yeah.
And so I'm like slowly getting over it, but it's been Like 3 years now, and and it still is like I had to take a deep breath and process it.
So the accident was bad then, I take it?
It was a bad car accident.
Did you get hurt?
Yes, I had to go to speech therapy.
Oh my gosh.
My car was totaled.
Did you get hit in the head?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I had a super bad concussion.
Did you give a stutter?
I was off work for months. And I've clearly recovered from it.
Right.
But it was very emotionally traumatizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And actually, like, I was a welfare caseworker at the time. My TANF caseload, you know, my coworkers did their best to try to cover for me, but I had like 140 families on my caseload, and I was just, one day I just was in a car accident and not at work for months.
Oh my gosh.
And so they had to cover for me, and I carried so much guilt for the families that I had these relationships with, because I worked there for.
That's not, you can't.
I've been there for.
Can't
I've known
blame
these families
yourself,
for like
though.
4 years.
I know, but you can't blame yourself.
I know. Anyway, I'm afraid of getting hurt in a car accident.
Anyway.
You were asking on like a big picture.
No, I like that though. Unless you want to talk about big picture. But I like that because that was very specific and that was unique. I mean, what are you gonna do? I'm afraid of failure and all this, like, you know, I'm not interested in that. Everyone's afraid of failure.
Yeah, I mean, I am kind of afraid that I'm gonna lose sight of my vision of myself. I had this vision of myself when I was a young high school and college student where I was gonna do something for like the larger liberation of women and people of color, where because I was gonna be a poet and a musician, and I was gonna do all this stuff. I didn't know who knows what this stuff is that I was gonna, but I was gonna do something that was gonna, you know, contribute towards the revolution in some way, and it was gonna be through poetry and music.
Why not?
Like, whoa, I don't know.
Those are inspiring things.
Right. Specifically, actually, I absolutely loved Audre Lorde. I read this book on an airplane, and I read it, and I remember I was like crying. So it was like this awkward, like
right. Crying
early
in public.
20-something, like crying and reading, but like trying not to be crying. So so I wanted to be like, I wanted to write something that was as like foundational and inspirational as Audre Lorde has been to third wave feminism and the literature that shaped me in college and all this stuff.
So you don't think you're on that track anymore, or you just haven't reached where you want to get to yet?
Well, I'm just nervous that I took this left turn because when I was working for the state government, when I was a welfare caseworker, I was like, there are things that I know I can be better at my job. What do I need to do to be better at them? And then I did some research and realized I need to go to graduate school and get a master's degree and learn these specific skills that I realized I didn't have.
And that'll take a lot of time.
Yeah, so 2 years later I have my master's degree, but I'm worried that I'm gonna lose sight of like what fueled me as a young person.
Yeah.
I'm like worried that I'm gonna lose that because I'm just like working for the man.
You're a cog in the machine.
Like typing emails to who knows who.
It's really hard to feel that fire when you're just in a cubicle all day.
Right. Like this will be, if you like add up the different jobs I've had, this will be like my 7th year sitting in a cubicle in various states and various jobs, various employers, sitting in a cubicle.
Right.
Is the revolution gonna happen in a cubicle?
Do you see any way of like perhaps uniting these professional and social or personal goals?
Maybe at the state level in state government or local county or city government. I would love to work directly with human beings again. When I was learning to recover from my car accident, I was engaging in a lot of what people call mindfulness work, and I was reading this other book, which I'm gonna get.
Okay.
This is a book called Trauma Stewardship.
And you read this in the hospital? Or?
Trauma Stewardship, an everyday guide to caring for self while caring with others. This book was actually given to me by my boss at the time at the welfare office. She bought a copy of this book out of her own pocket for every single person on our team. There were like 15 of us or something.
Because of you?
No. She bought it like before my car accident.
Oh, okay.
She had this idea that we were gonna change the way we did casework with our clients.
Okay.
and that we were going to engage in what's called trauma-informed care, where we recognize that every person is like somewhat traumatized by whatever's going on, and we need to approach whatever's going on with them by recognizing that they have experienced trauma, and you need to like approach it. So like,
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So like, here's a concrete example. Say you are the receptionist in the office that administers food stamps, Medicaid, and TANF cash, and someone comes up to the front desk and just starts cussing you out because they've been waiting for 25 minutes. Who in the heck do you think you are? Mm-hmm. I don't even have a pen. Why don't you have pens for me to write with for my application? When is this going to be processed? I need to catch the bus. It's cold out. Like, they have a list of things, and you're the receptionist, and you're just like, I don't get paid enough for this.
Right.
Like, who does this person think they are? They're cussing me out, all this stuff. Trauma-informed practice would say, this person is coming to you because they have a really long, complex history of people in positions of power, specifically in government offices, being rude to them, maybe manipulating their emotions in some way, or like doing something that makes them feel like shit. Mm-hmm. And so their way of protecting themselves is to come at you as strong as they can, because that's the only way that they're not vulnerable to you, who has all of the power in the situation, because they're asking for help. Yeah. So I was reading this book during this very pivotal moment in my life, and I was like, everybody is traumatized on some level. In order for you to be mean to someone, you had to be taught that the only way you can get attention is to be mean, right? And that was probably a really hard lesson. Yeah. And you probably learned that as a little kid because someone was really mean to you and you paid attention to them, and then you were like, I'm paying really close attention to you because you were so mean. If I'm really mean to someone else, they're gonna pay attention to me. Even if someone walks in and you feel like that person just did something really sexist to me, or they said something that was, you know, very insensitive, if you pause and you treat each person with, you know, you can say it's a trauma-informed lens, you can say you're treating them with compassion, or you could just say you're putting yourself in their shoes for once. Everyone is coming from somewhere that is either like a place of very good intention, and whether or not that intention came across is a whole other thing. Yeah. But like, I can choose to not receive and react in that way. Like, if you do something that's like super mean and awful to me, and I'm at work and it makes me hate my job and all this stuff, I'm choosing to react to you that way.
It's a very humbling way to look at it. Because usually when someone attacks you, you take it personally and you're like, me, I'm hurt, Right. But through this lens, it's like, what has happened to you to make you want to be mean to me? It's almost taking you out of the equation, which is very interesting, very like altruistic, noble. I like it.
Like, when I sit there and I think about the guy who was my peer in high school, who called me a feminist because he was trying to be really mean to me, he must have been like feeling so shitty about himself that he was like, I need to take someone down. And who better to take down than the person who was like that girl in class? He must have just been in a bad place all of the time to be mean all of the time. Yeah. And what a terrible childhood that must have been. Yeah. So like, what gives me hope is like realizing that everyone is able to heal and get better, and everyone can like work on their stuff. Like, no one is inherently bad or evil.
Right.
Nobody.
When someone insults you, it's not about you, it's about them.
Right. It's about them wanting to make you feel the pain that's already happening in there. Right. So learning to sort of be mindful with the way you interact with things and how you approach things is really what helped me sort of overcome the trauma of my car accident, and like helped me forgive the person who drove into me and totaled my car and gave me temporary brain damage, and like all, you know, you can just like approach things and not carry this toxic burden with you, and just recognize that we're all just going to start a new day tomorrow. Wow. And they can all just...
That's such a healthy way to live. That's honestly like the most healthy way I've heard. Like, anyone would like try to live.
I mean, it's, you know, I have days when I...
Right, well, you can't do it every day, but...
There are days when I do not live to that expectation.
Right, yeah. But at least to strive, at least to have that goal is
and
special.
Especially, like, there are certainly days when I'm feeling like highly emotional, or I like lash out at the wrong people and I feel really bad about it, then I can like reflect on that and remember that I don't have to be like that every day,
Yeah.
and I can be a better person tomorrow. Everyone can, even the dick, or even the jerk who calls you,
yeah.
even the jerk who calls you a feminist because they're trying to be mean, but really it's a compliment.
Right. Yeah.